Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody on the line, and thank you for joining our latest in our series of webcasts. We will be focusing today on data mastery and integration in a disparate platform, and I am really excited to have a new strategic partner we've been working with here, Magnitude, on the line, and today I have John Hume and Doug Corporeal. And Doug and John, welcome to our webinar.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
And I also have on the line Steve Stone, my colleague in crime here at Bramasol. Steve, welcome.
Thanks, John. Good morning.
Good morning. So just a few reminders before we dive right in. This webinar, of course, is being recorded, so you'll have access to it and be able to share it with your friends and colleagues later on. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. You can do that by coming down to the question panel in your little panel that you have up there. So please do ask questions, ask any question. We will answer as many as we can in the time we have allotted. And for those we're not able to get to, we always follow up in writing. And of course, if you have questions for the Magnitude team, we'll also be sharing those with them. You can download previous webinars from our homepage. Check it out. You can come up here and go to bramasol.com and check out the Resource Center. Check out our webinars that we've been doing here, and you can scroll down, look at the ones that are there. You can also check out some great customer stories. And I know that my friends from Magnitude have a whole bunch of webinars that they've been doing. So I'll encourage you to hop on over there and see some of the great material that they've been doing as well. You can contact us. And we'd love to have you contact us at bramasol.com. You can come over and click any of these engage buttons that we have. You can do search and engage with us through this icon using just voice. You can go to the Facebook page, LinkedIn pages, and of course we have our YouTube channel. And we're excited to have you come in and take a look at all the different videos that we have in place. We probably have between 50 and 100 different videos that you can check out on subjects such as treasury, and others. We got through our introductions and a welcome, so welcome to all of you, and we're excited to have you on here. We talked about the housekeeping. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about a concept that we've talked about with Magnitude and with a number of different companies around the idea of digital debt, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'll turn it over to John Hume, and John's going to talk about success in data harmonization and the importance of focusing on data. He'll talk about the relationships between SAP Central Finance, scope, value, and data requirements. We'll recognize some of the challenges and pitfalls of common methodologies and talk about a better way to do that. And then learn about some of the key automation in that process. And then, of course, we'll have a Q&A at the end. But again, I encourage all of you, please feel free to ask questions throughout. Quick reminder of who is Bramasol. Bramasol is the leaders in SAP Finance and Business Transformation. We are owned by Dr. Hasso Plattner, who is one of the 5 co-founders of SAP, and he is a member of the supervisory board. He has been an owner of Bramasol since 2004 and serves and helps direct us and is very much involved in our strategic direction and supports the company on a regular basis. And we have a headquarters in California, and we focused on, as I said, digital and business transformation. And we do that across a number of different pillars, including treasury, revenue accounting, leasing and asset management, as well as transformation project, including S/4HANA, and we offer advisory services. So we are unique in that we bring expert accounting practice to the table in addition to our deep expertise in the technical space. With that, let me transition to this idea of digital debt. And I've done some research and talked to a number of different companies about this concept of paralytic business models. And a paralytic business model is exactly what it says. It's a model in which you're paralyzed. You can't move forward, you can't change. And the symptoms of that are you're unable to scale quickly and easily. For example, mergers and acquisitions, it becomes hard to bring in M&A. You're inflexible to new business models, and certainly in today's times of economic disruption, all kinds of companies are looking at new business models, whether they are through new fulfillment models, utilizing subscription models, or other similar activities in a more remote environment. You need a way to do that. You're spending more time fixing and reconciling data than analyzing that data. Upgrading is like a complete re-implementation. A few years ago, we went through the same experience with a customer, and believe me, data was one of the big challenges that they faced, and it was almost like starting from scratch. You have the guy, but you only have one guy, and that guy is the guy who knows how all of your data works. And if that poor guy got run over by a bus, as we say, or retired, there's nobody else who knows how to do it, how it works, where did the data come from. Onboarding people is difficult, and of course, in the treasury space, we talk about and laugh about the fact that the bank probably knows more about your cash than you do. All of those are symptoms of the idea of digital debt. So what is digital debt? Digital debt is a burden that's put upon the company that's based on the fact that you have old infrastructure, complicated business processes, and challenging data models. We're going to focus today on the data models. And some of the symptoms and issues around that are if your business processes look like this and you have old unused data, you're having a ton of archived and old unused data. You have multiple data formats, so you're not sure where your data is coming from and what it looks like. There's corrupted data, insufficient or incomplete data. You have no real governance models, highly customized data fields and data definitions, random security, or you're simply pulling information from so many different places across so many different disparate systems that it becomes a challenge for you to manage your business. In a nutshell, if your infrastructure looks like this, your business processes look like this, and your data lake, well, kind of looks like that, then you know that you have paralytic business models. The good news is that you can solve that. Now, how could you have gotten here? You can get there through acquisitions and mergers. You needed special processes to handle one new client, that big new client that you got, and then you added another and another and another. You didn't invest in data mastery, or you didn't invest in tools that help you manage and harmonize data like those from Magnitude. Regulatory changes were addressed individually or manually. For example, we've been through experiences recently on the new revenue accounting, lease accounting, and treasury changes. Those include IFRS 15, 16, and 9, where the company addressed those individually. Didn't look at the master data, didn't look at the master processes, and therefore you ended up with these challenges. Or you didn't use experts. You used the same person that you used to do your AMS support, your outsourced low-cost provider, and you didn't invest in the experts who really understand the intricacies and challenges of data in this new environment. So we're here today to talk about and talk with our friends from Magnitude, because SAP offers a great new opportunity for you to invest in central finance and allow you to focus and bring your finance areas into a single place and deal with disparate environments, whether it's multiple data sources across multiple platforms, Oracle, Microsoft, Dell Tech, and others, and then bring that in a really nice and simplified process. And so I don't want to take away, John, your thunder, so I'm going to pass the baton over to you. And you can tell us a little bit about the awesome work that you and your team are doing to help companies. So let's make you the presenter.
Thank you, John. And so I will pick up where you left off.
All right, we can see your screen, sir.
Great. So I'm going to talk within the context of central finance, some of the things that we've seen and how to achieve success with data harmonization specifically. It's just a part of what John described up front as that digital debt. I've been in this space for quite some time, and working mainly in BI, data warehousing, and then most recently here with integration applications for Central Finance. I'm joined by Doug Corpuel, who is our Senior Director for our Central Finance products at Magnitude, and he'll be joining us at the end for questions and answers. Now, as we've talked about and John alluded to, we want to first understand the relationship of how Central Finance scope and what you wish to get out of Central Finance relates to the value and then the master data requirements, and what do you have to do there? What are the challenges along the way? How do you overcome them? And what can you automate? What can you do in a smart manner around data to accelerate your project and deliver more value and do it faster? So if we start with just kind of the problem here is Central Finance is a great platform. Many of the largest companies in the world are adopting it to bring all of their disparate systems together to achieve some sort of business value. It could be reporting, it could be scaling processes and centralizing processes. It could be just as a stepping stone into a new technology with HANA and their new S4 ERP system. The challenge there is you've got to bring all your data into Central Finance, not only SAP data, but non-SAP also. And about 85% of what we see in Central Finance landscapes and opportunities is 85% have non-SAP systems. And that's where we have provided some expertise to SAP to help with that challenge. We've been working with SAP technologies for over 20 years at Magnitude and bringing non-SAP data together historically for analytics and reporting purposes. And so we had a good functional and technical fit to help SAP with a Central Finance data integration use case. And so we worked with SAP since 2015 on co-innovating these solutions. So leveraging our historical technologies, working with SAP product development, and then bringing these to market over the last 5 years, we've gained the trust of many of the Fortune 100 customers that SAP has for Central Finance to bring the non-SAP systems into that environment. So we'll come back to this slide here, and really these are pre-built connectors that do various aspects of data integration against major ERPs, minor ERPs, and even a universal format for many of the smaller regional homegrown systems. And so all of this has to do with data in some way and data integration, and data is kind of an overloaded term. I'll kind of define that here. The task really in a Central Finance deployment, you've got to get your master data set up, and we'll be focusing today mostly on this module here. You've got to bring your definitions of your chart of accounts and cost centers and customers and vendors and materials and maybe even projects, depending on the scope of business processes you wish to implement with Central Finance. You have a scope of master data. And so we have a module that accelerates and automates a lot of the tasks that are necessary to bring all that master data together into a common definition and common repository. That's the foundation, and then you can get to loading transactional data and replicating transactions. So as you do operational processes like sales and purchase orders in your source systems, eventually that flows into, say, a financial subledger like AP or AR, and then ultimately posted to general ledger. It's at that point where you've got to get that in a Central Finance landscape into the universal journal. And we have a transaction replication module that brings that financial posting into the universal journal, and we do that at a detail level to really fill that universal journal, if you're familiar with that concept, with all the attributes from general ledger, from AP or AR or whatever other subledger module it is, and really fill that up with valuable information and do that in a real-time manner. We then have a drill down application that extends the information available to a user of Central Finance down to that sales order, purchase order, that operational level from non-SAP systems. So if you drill back from a journal to an SAP source, you can go right back and navigate to those sales orders and purchase orders natively. And so we've extended that ability to non-SAP systems where you can still drill back to or drill down into a JD Edwards purchase order, for example. And then we have, if you step kind of really into shared services, if you want to implement central payments with S4 and Central Finance, you've got to have a way for the non-SAP systems especially to clear the open items as you are applying payments in Central Finance. And so we have a module that covers that clearing of open items back in the source as central payments are made in Central Finance. That's important for operational reasons, like maybe you have a credit check in a source system that depends on an accurate customer balance, and you may not be able to book a new order if that customer balance is not up to date in the source. And then finally, because this is all integration and you have financial transactions being replicated, there's a multiple step process. These source ERPs, you have to go through a data model transformation and maybe rounding and document splitting and other things. So making sure that that process happened properly is really important. And so this last module for reconciliation is providing full transparency and auditability to the replication processes that you see above. And that's important for efficiency of month-end close. If you're doing that in Central Finance, you have to make sure all of your journals from your sources were posted to Central Finance, and also for auditing, providing lineage and other types of reports to your auditors. So all of these modules, again, just really handle a majority of the data integration aspects that we've encountered and our customers have encountered when it comes to bringing that non-SAP data into Central Finance. You can think of it all as harmonization in some way into that common definition that ultimately users are going to adopt with SAP on the right side. Now, the value you get out of this is really fourfold. Number one, full data integration, you're driving higher business value of your Central Finance deployment because you can implement all of the processes and we'll make sure all the data that is required for those processes is there. These can be installed very quickly and as little as 15 to 20 days per environment. So you can achieve that value a lot faster. And then we're lowering the total cost of ownership for the upfront installation and then also the ongoing maintenance and increasing user efficiency by providing them tools like drill down and like reconciliation. And then it's not easy to do. That's why we're talking today. We're really reducing the risk of deploying Central Finance. So, because we have these pre-built and proven products.
Hey, John, we have a question on the line, and then I'd like to, if you don't mind, run a quick poll while we're answering the question. One of the attendees asked a question, can you share with us, or how does this compare with or contrast with SAP SLT? Is it a replacement for it, an enhancement to it? How does this relate to that?
Really good question, and it comes up often. This is a complement to SLT. So if you're implementing Central Finance, you will automatically have SLT, especially for the ECC systems. There's the pre-built replication that SLT provides. What SLT provides for third-party ERP systems is, as of 1909, an 11-table interface, and that changes with every release and as SAP enhances. But there's an interface, a series of tables that is essentially you have to bring data into those tables in SLT, and then SLT does its job to finish the posting process along with Central Finance. And so you have to have a way to get the data into the SLT interface, and this is all about what Magnitude does. For example, the transaction replication module, its source is, for example, Oracle Business Suite or Microsoft Dynamics. It has its own data model. So we have a pre-built extraction, a transformation, hundreds of validations against that data, and then finally a loading process into SLT, into those 11 tables. And behind the scenes, we use SAP Data Services to do that because SLT cannot handle the complexity of those transformations that are required. So you need actually both.
Need both. Okay. So maybe while I'm going to launch a quick poll just to find out how many of you out there have heterogeneous environments. And then, John, while I'm doing that, if you wouldn't mind kind of answering a quick question. What do you see? You guys do this a lot. I know you guys are involved in 60, 70% of the CFIN activity that's out there. Why do customers have these environments, and why are they considering this in your perspective?
Sure. Well, I think it just is the nature of these businesses and the size of the businesses. A lot of customers that adopt Central Finance are very large, and or they are growing through mergers and acquisitions. And so you'll have a mix of ERP systems out there. Some companies have consolidated them to fewer ERP systems, but a lot of times, you know, migrating or changing a logistics or a manufacturing system is difficult. It's been set up and highly tuned for that particular business or business line, and but at the end of the day, you've got to get the financials all together across the company and the different business units. So it can be a benefit to leave those ERP systems like a JD Edwards in place, and then use our connectors to bring that data into Central Finance for financial reporting, and then consolidation and shared service around the financial side, because that can be common across multiple disparate business units.
Right, and that's consistent, you know, with what we hear, and certainly as we talk with SAP and other customers, they're looking at not only the existing, but the ability to be flexible going forward as they do mergers and acquisitions. So thanks everybody for voting. We got about 75% of you who said you do have disparate landscapes. With John, I'm sure that's no surprise to you. So go ahead.
Okay. So let me get into some of the complexities around master data specifically, because it's its own topic, and we can cover transactions another day. There's a relationship between the value that you wish to achieve with Central Finance, the scope that you have to deploy, and all the dependencies and complexities along the way. So I assume many people here are familiar with Central Finance. There's a lot that you can get out of it. Reporting, planning, compliance, shared service, and centralization of a lot of your finance operations, like centralized close, and then get into centralizing cash and central payments and others. So each company is going to have your own, you know, unique requirements for what you want, what's in your business case, essentially for Central Finance. And if you look at that just another way, kind of left to right, you've got a relationship there between what you want to deliver in Central Finance as your scope and the related configurations and master data that have to be set up. So if you're looking at just say a reporting use case that might be just financial in nature, you've got to set up a few of the reference data items, of course, countries and document types and things like that. Some other elements, company codes, and then your finance master data, your GL account, cost center especially. Those are required setups. Now, if you want to say centralize your close, well, that's close, and so you'll have some of those same and maybe an expanded list of requirements on the right to be able to set up and map. Now you want to add, say, management reporting or analyze customers or vendors or profitability analysis. Now you have the prerequisites that were already there, plus you've got to bring in customers and vendors into business partners and maybe materials and all the prerequisite configurations related to them, like payment terms and others. So you've got an increasing complexity here with your master data and configuration requirements in Central Finance. And then you want to go full shared services, say a central payment scenario. You pretty much need everything on the right and more than that that I haven't listed. So you can see it becomes pretty complex just in terms of what the requirements are. And that's part of the challenge, even is looking at your scope of Central Finance and then determining what is the scope of the master data. the categories and then the fields that you need to do transactions. So this is complex by itself, and then you look at additional challenges along the way. I won't get into all of these, but like I said, knowing the scope of the master data that you need, how do you get it from the systems? How do you profile it to make sure, see what the quality is? Can I get a t-shirt size of what my my data cleanup might look like? How do I merge and how do I get common definitions of a customer or a vendor? I may have the same customer or vendor in multiple systems, and how do I create a single business partner out of that? So lots of challenges along the way that you have to solve for. So there's been traditional approaches of configuration and master data, and they may likely continue or still be used. The first one is that we've seen is kind of a minimum scope. Just go for finance only, map your GL accounts and cost centers, push customer, vendor, all of that, master data that's more detailed to a future phase. You don't get all of the value of central finance by doing that. If your scope for central finance is kind of a GL only or a finance only, then you might be okay. But if you have a future phase or future requirements for central payments or customer vendor kind of reporting, that's probably not going to work, or it's going to require redevelopment in the future. You then have an option to say customers and vendors, I'll use that as an example. Just bring whatever is in your source system into central finance and map it one-to-one, ignore the data quality, ignore the duplicate customers or vendors, and you may be able to get some of that implemented with minimal, say, cleanup or harmonization, but you don't get the reporting that you wanted, you don't get the scale of centralized processing that you had hoped for. You can do a manual mapping. We've heard customers refer to this as kind of a swivel chair method of harmonization and deduplication. So I have a spreadsheet on the left side of my screen and a spreadsheet on the right side of my screen, and how can I look back and forth and map and deduplicate customers and vendors. And so it's a very manual, tedious cleanup process. And so that obviously may work for a pilot with a small, few hundred or thousand records, but does not scale to a large enterprise or multiple systems. So then you have, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you've got master data governance like MDG. Very high value, very strategic, long-term, and it's a complex project. Requires changes to organization. You have to put people, processes, systems in place, and it takes a long time. It's disruptive. So you may not want to fully go for all of full data governance with central authorship, because then you'll never finish your central finance project. So what is really a middle ground here? If you think
John, there is a question, what is the role of MDG if we opt for Source Connect? Are you going to kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I will. Just hold that question on. I will answer it in the very next slide here. Because what we've done is we've created a very tactical approach. If you think of crawl, walk, run being MDG, we're kind of getting you to that crawl, walk stage with master data related to central finance, so that then it's easier for you to get to MDG and that run state. So it's a very tactical, pragmatic solution with our harmonization module here. So if you look at the master data requirements for central finance, again, this depends on your scope you're going to deploy. You've got records in your source system for all of these. You ultimately have to get it over into central finance, and as related to that, I'm representing generically here SAP MDG. This could be the MDG that comes embedded with central finance with just the mapping tables essentially, or it could be a full MDG deployment with governance. We don't care, but essentially SAP Central Finance uses that to translate master data from source values or records into the central finance values when it posts to the Universal Journal. So our target has to be MDG. And what we've done is created pre-built extractions for all of those records for those different categories from the different ERP systems. And so we can retrieve initially for the first load, and then we can capture ongoing updates and new records in various source systems, assuming you don't have data governance there yet. We can then profile it. So we can tell you for your customers and vendors what required fields are missing values, if lengths are too long or don't meet the length requirements of the right-hand side. If codes, there's a certain list of values of valid codes like country codes. If your values violate those validation lists. And so then you have, that t-shirt size you were looking for what kind of data cleanup am I going to have. And so that's important as that very first step, that we can quickly get you that profile of your data. Mm-hmm. So once you've gone through that process and maybe cleaned up some of the records, we then have the next part, which is a preparation process. And so the term harmonization in our product name actually comes from part of this. The first one is that merging of duplicates. It's really looking at your source records. I know you say customers and vendors. We use machine learning to look at those records and identify where there are duplicates. And so we're able to harmonize multiple definitions of customer or vendor within an ERP or across multiple ERP systems and merge them together using source priority and survivorship rules into we'll call it a golden record. And then we're also doing additional preparation. So we're transforming customers, vendors into the business partner format. We're exploding down to a business partner role level. So, you have business partner and then customer and vendor roles, and then at that lower level, a company code association that we'll set up and set certain attributes like a reconciliation account that are required for transacting. So a lot of preparation that has to be done to that data coming from the sources before it loads into the MDG on the right. And then we finally have a predefined upload process. So once we prepare the data and it's all ready and maybe somebody's looked at it and made any last modifications, we call the APIs of MDG to upload. And so you can see MDG is the ultimate target. And so we're able to quickly load the data from the non-SAP systems, even SAP actually we can take data from, and get it into the MDG that you're using along with Central Finance. So it's essentially an accelerator to load MDG for Central Finance. Now what we've done is predefined the scope of master data for Central Finance, and we've created this application very specific to loading just the data that's required for Central Finance, because we want to make sure that your CFIN project stays on track, and the master data part is probably one of the most complex parts of your Central Finance project. And so we're trying to take that crawl, walk, that tactical approach to get things ready. And then when you're ready or in parallel or subsequent to Central Finance deployment, you can start focusing on the governance and then take it from, into that run state.
Yeah, and John, when you say SAP MDG, there's a question about, do I have to use SAP MDG or can I use other tools such as Informatica, for example?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So in a Central Finance landscape, ultimately the data has to get into the MDG framework, either the embedded MDG or a full MDG. So I don't think that's an optional component as related to Central Finance, and thus our target is always going to be MDG. Now, there may be an opportunity for us to, take the Informatica repository that may already exist and feed records from there as a source into our process to bridge that gap into MDG. But we'd probably want to talk further, offline about that use case.
Cool. All
right, good. All right, so I'm going to quickly run through kind of a little bit more about this harmonization process, because that's the theme of today, and I'll try to go fairly quickly. Essentially, we're able to extract the data from the different systems, bring it into a common model, a predefined model for related to central finance here. We talked about the profiling, where we can tell what records are valid, invalid, data volumes. And then the harmonization process really is interesting because we're trying to automate and make this as simple as possible. And if you think about harmonization, you have records coming in, say I load 100,000 records for customers across multiple different systems. What we're doing is our machine learning engine is comparing each record against every other record. And we are scoring them according to how well they match or they don't match. And so you have it 3 buckets. On the left is matches that or scorings that, it's like comparing Magnitude with Bramasol. Completely different companies, different addresses, phone numbers, everything. And so they're going to score very low. And so that you'll want to auto create these records as unique records, don't match them or pair them together. On the right side, you have the opposite, where you may have 2 different companies, or 2 different ERP systems that have the same record. One might have Magnitude and one might have Magnitude software, but they have very similar addresses. And so our machine will score them highly. You'll want to auto merge these, and our software will do that into a single record so that you can have a harmonized, a single view of Magnitude across those ERPs. And then in the middle, there's a window where the machine is not confident enough to do anything with it, and so a human needs to look at those records. And so then there's these 2 thresholds, and there's a threshold on the left that says how strict or loose do I want that, below this certain threshold to auto create unique records, and above this merge threshold to auto match and merge. So you set these according to your own data profile. And so you can use our pre-built training that we've done. You can also retrain the system with your own data, but essentially you tune these so that you're maximizing the automation on the left and right to your comfort level and leaving as little in the human review as possible. And then once that goes through, you can review the records, you can track your progress, you can do that human review where I see 2 records side by side and I get to make a decision. I can look up previous records and split them apart or change the matching that the engine has done. I can search for records, I can change and override. In this case, the world of business and business world were 2 different customer names, and based on the source priority that we configured here, it chose one of them, but I can switch it to a different value that may have come from a different system for that record. Can correct violations, the field names too long, or violations where missing required values. So then everything is audited on the back end, and you're able to see who did what, when, what the machine matched together. And so all that's tracked on the back end. So then the final process is the upload. So you then were able to upload into Central Finance and MDG, the business partner. And so we'll enable the business partner role, the company code association, and then detailed company code level attributes. So we'll create the master records, and then we'll create the key mappings that's the MDG mapping tables that come with Central Finance. We're loading those definitions in there so that you have that translation ability from the source customer, in this example, to the Central Finance or MDG version. So this is all the pre-built stuff that we're doing. And then we can synchronize those new changes. We can upload the first time, and we can synchronize new records into that MDG deployment ongoing until such time where maybe it doesn't make sense anymore for certain ERPs where you've centralized the authorship and maintenance of master data with publishing back to the source. But then you acquire a new company that has a Microsoft system, and you've got to bring that data on board again. You can use the Magnitude's harmonization module to onboard that new master data and kind of start all over again. So it supports that M&A platform pretty well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then finally, just a summary of the capabilities that we have. So the pre-built extractions, the data profiling, the mapping, Ed didn't talk about it, the mapping templates for some of the configurations. You have a whole bunch of those prerequisite configurations like company codes and payment terms and others. We have templates that can bring the source and target values together to help speed that mapping process early in your central finance configuration. Talked about the automated harmonization, the interface and the API to upload into MDG and central finance, the ability to do initial load and then the incremental logic for new records. And we also have an integration with our transaction products where because you need, before a transaction can post to central finance in the universal journal, you have to have the master data set up properly. And that's where a lot of the AIF errors come from, where you have a missing customer or a missing GL account. We can integrate those together so that we're loading master data incrementally right before the transaction goes. Extensions, error handling, all that's built in too. So trying to provide a complete framework to really help with the speeding the master data. And if you look at it just graphically across your entire life cycle of your central finance deployment, we're accelerating, we're automating, and trying to streamline. It's not going to eliminate all the work you have to do for sure, but what it's trying to do is kind of lower those mountains down into peaks. And I guess I've got a graphics build thing. All right, I'll take a breath and had some questions along the way, but John, anything else? And I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, well, no, that's great. And, you know, I've been really excited about working with you guys. I know we've talked to a number of customers, met with you guys, and this is a great opportunity for people to really centralize and understand how data needs to be managed, but done in a way in a disparate platform that makes it easy and consumable. Let me launch a quick new poll. In today's environment, of course, you know, things are changing constantly. So, you know, how has the technology or transformation project you've been doing been affected by the, I'll call it the disruption? So if you guys could all vote on that, have you postponed projects? We actually know of some people, and maybe John, you and Doug can talk about what are you seeing in the world out there for central finance? We're actually seeing a mix where some customers have had, as we're seeing in our results, no impact. Others have refocused, and actually we have one or two clients who have accelerated projects because they're looking for ways to get value.
Yeah, and we're seeing this kind of the same thing is so some companies putting all projects on pause. You know, some are just continuing, and then, like you said, there are some that are looking at central finance specifically to provide them the flexibility to kind of unstick them from that, I guess, digital debt and that you talked about up front, so that, you know, they can respond better to situations like this.
Okay, so there's another question. We'll take this one offline. It's a little more specific. So it looks like it's a fair mix. Well, there's only 16%. If you guys can, a few more of you can get in and vote, let's get up to, maybe we can get you up to 20%, 1 in 5 of you. A couple more people vote there. Maybe. All right, let's close that out. It looks like it's a fair mix, John, as you and I just discussed. You know, there's a number of people who have postponed, some have had no impact, others are taking an opportunity to refocus on other priorities, and I think that's great because that's similar to what we're seeing in the marketplace. So let's go ahead. I will take back, did you pass? Make myself presenter, show my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Let's see if we go into show mode. So let's wrap up. I want to thank John. Few more questions. I know we have Doug and Steve on here to answer questions or make comments. Maybe we'll start with Doug.
Yeah.
Doug, if you had a couple of thoughts in wrapping up, your perspective. You're out there a lot. We first met, not first met, we've met a few times, but we met back in January in Atlanta. Any perspectives that you might be able to share?
I believe Doug is having computer issues
Right.
right at the moment. And so,
Steve, you and
No,
I have been, yeah, go ahead.
no,
Yeah.
I was going to say what I just said before. I think I would parrot what you were saying about what we're seeing, especially in this landscape of lockdowns and disruption. That for some companies, central finance is actually a really good path, and so we hope that companies will either continue or take a look more at central finance to help with their flexibility in their business.
Steve, any thoughts from your perspective? Looks like Steve is unmuted him. I've unmuted you, Steve. You are muted.
Okay, thank you, John. No, I think the one thing to keep in mind here is these aren't, we see again and again, these aren't one-time events. So it's not like, oh, we're going to go do this and we'll fix it this afternoon and then it'll all be good as we go forward. Many of these, the earlier symptoms that we saw are built over time. They are, incremental investments that just manifest themselves. And I think that's something to remember as you approach these projects and you look at utilizing tools from Magnitude, that these are practices and processes that you're putting in place to really maintain your data quality and maintain that information over time. And it begins with incremental changes and can be very small projects, or they can be transformation.
Yeah, that's a great point, Steve. And John, we're going to follow up on the transactional piece because I know this is day one, right? And as the experts in compliance for finance, particularly around areas like revenue accounting, asset management, lease accounting, real estate, IFRS 9 for treasury and whatnot, everybody can do day one. The plan and the issue and the challenge, of course, is how do you deal with day two? How do you deal with changes in your environment? How do you onboard, as you said, additional ERPs and environments, or as you begin to merge and transition them, what's the process? And of course, you go through a transactional process further on. So we'll explore that, I think, in some upcoming opportunities as well.
John, there's on the note there, in the time that we're in right now, it's just oh, we have a new business model today because yesterday's no longer works. So I mean, these things do come out of the blue. They're not always planned.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And one of the things that we've talked, John, and with John and Doug about at Magnitude is, companies who are still doing compliance manually. Central Finance is a great opportunity for you to consolidate your leasing together and your real estate management together. And this tool or set of tools that has been developed by Magnitude works very well in that situation as well, because it's a central finance environment. And whether you decide to do a decentralized lease management strategy and roll that back up into central finance for the purposes of compliance and reporting, you can do that as we begin to work through the revenue accounting side of that. Treasury is a perfect example of somewhere where you can do things like POBO, COBO, ROBO, payment factories, centralized cash and cash management. So again, there's some great opportunities for you to go ahead and do that. We have another question here. Does Magnitude have connections for Epicor and eScala, or iScala rather?
Yes, we actually have some capability for iScala. Epicor has many ERPs, but that is one of them where we do have some coverage. So we'd love to talk to you about that.
Excellent. And John, of course, we'll share the questions and list with you. All right. Well, let's wrap up. I want to thank John and Doug. Doug's experiencing what all of us go through every now and then, a lot of fun with the internet. So John, thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking with you.
And
As we,
likewise, thank you.
yeah, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you as a strategic partner on these areas. As you saw, many companies do suffer from digital debt. It's like institutional cholesterol, right? It clogs up the veins and doesn't allow you to work as efficiently as you can. It builds up in clogs and can't be solved overnight. But using tools and using things like Central Finance can help you do that. Central Finance can help. It's like the cholesterol drug, if you will, but it's a long-term process that you have to undertake. It's scalable, flexible. It is designed to support disparate platforms. And of course, key to all of this is mastering the data. We've heard that data can be difficult, and I think traditional models using workarounds and spreadsheets and other tools is probably a weak model, in my opinion, based on what I've seen here and what we've learned over time with our friends from SAP and Magnitude. Proper scoping and focus throughout the process, I think, John, you'd agree, is critical. It's really understanding what are you trying to accomplish at the end of the day? What's the goal in mind? You know, as Stephen Covey says, you know, really begin with the end in mind and think about what you're trying to achieve, and then how does your data strategy match with that? And then finally, you know, as I said early on, you want to use experts. Don't rely on other companies to do the work of experts. Look to companies like Magnitude and Bramasol and SAP who have the expertise to get this done, get it done right, because the last thing you want to do is do this over again. So with that, again, I thank Doug, John, and Steve. I thank all of you for joining. I look forward to more questions and follow on. We'll be having some more webinars as we always do, and we'll be doing some joint activities with the Magnitude team coming up. So I look forward to that. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and keep safe, and we'll all get through this together. Thank you very much.